Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in our weekly Hebrew word study. And we are continuing in the book of First Samuel and chapter 27, picking up in verse 5 today, where David, of course, is somewhat free from Saul's wrath right now, and he's found a little bit of respite. A little bit of rest, but in a very strange place and under some very strange circumstances. And we're going to take a look at those and find David showing some very strange behavior, although we will see stranger as we more strange behavior as we go into future lessons. So we pick up at verse 5 and Vayomer David at Achish. And so David said to Achish, which is the one of the kings there, if I have now im na matzati, if I have now found, and he uses the word chen, which is a chet and a nun safit, which is translated as favor, but really means grace. This is a beautiful word in the Hebrew, but it's interesting that David is appealing for grace, but enecha, in the eyes of this king. And he's saying, if I have not found grace in your eyes, give me a place, give me a town that I can call my own, that I can live in. And so he says, why should I dwell in your royal city and kind of mooch off of you when I can have my own city and take care of myself? Again, David is feigning allegiance to the Philistines. Again, just an incredible turn of events here that after slaying Goliath and routing the Philistines, now he is living with them and winning their trust, at least this king. And so the king, Achish, was okay with it. And verse 6, he gave unto him this city called Ziklag. And this city will come into play in future um, stories, but this is kind of interesting. Um, is he was given this city. Well, there were already people living there. What was it like for these people who live there to suddenly have David as their ruler? And now, instead of being ruled by the Philistines, he was ruled by them and David's band of men. And so it says here that this city now became part of the king's lineage in the days of Judah. Now, we have to remember that this was in the land of Judah. It was one time conquered by Joshua and the Israelites, but they had lost control of it and the Philistines had taken it back. So David is still in technically Israel, what it was intended to be, but he is out of the area of control of the current state of Israel, of what it was under King Saul. And so the Ziklag does stay in the lineage of David and in the tribe of Judah, and it says forever and ever until this day. And so what's interesting here is it talks about David's time in Ziklag. In verse 7, Vayehi mishpar hayamim Asher Yashav David. And so it says that he dwelt there, and it doesn't give a time. It says a full time and a time. And then later on, it comes down here that he dwelt in the country of the Philistines, Yamim Vayarba'ah Hadashim. So it translates as 1 year and 4 months. But this runs into a little problem mathematically because Saul was only king for 2 years, as we find in other places. So uh, they're not quite sure what this time meant. They think it was maybe for 4 months and a few days. So this yamim is really the word for days, and the four is, arba is for four. And so they're saying it's probably just 4 months and a few days, not a whole year. But look what's happening while David is in this city of Ziklag. He goes out in verse 8, starts sacking and raiding, not Jerusalem, or excuse me, areas of the Israelites, but he is sacking and raiding Philistine cities. And again, just pretty incredible what you're about to read here. And so he starts attacking these. And then verse 9, it says, that whoever he attacked, whatever cities he attacked, he did not leave any one man, woman, or child alive to tattle on him or to be a witness and um, tell what was going on. Took all the spoils. So he brings it back, and King Achish comes to him and says, "Well, what have you been doing today? Where have you been? Where did you go raiding?" And David says, "Well, he lies here." He lies to him and says, "Oh, I went against areas to the south. I went against Judah. I went against the Israelites." And of course, he had to think sooner or later somebody would have found out about what he was doing. But it doesn't seem to be the case here just yet. And so he didn't save anyone alive. Again, that's kind of disturbing on its own if you think of that. But again, a different time, different era. We can't think of it in our 21st century Western minds because it's just kind of appalling. Um, it's just the way it was. This was life back then. And what else was kind of interesting too is the city of Ziklag. I felt there was something about this name of the city because every name has a meaning, and so I tried to look up Ziklag. Again, the meaning isn't very easily found, but it does seem to have some similar letters that come from the name for a sack bag, like a bag that you'd put loot in, and you would tie the top of the bag together. And so I just want you to think of that to see if that has any connection here with what David is doing in ransacking, if you will, the cities around about him. And, is there a connection that the name of the city is kind of given to the sacks that are brought back with the loot that David has been bringing? But what we find interesting here is that he lies to the Achish and tell him that he's, raiding the Israelites. And Achish looks at this and says, "This seems to be a really good thing." Looking at the behavior of this king in verse 12, that he feels that this act of what David is doing would make the Israelites utterly abhor him and that he's totally turned against his people. And he sees it not as a way to make David a better person or make him a friend. He looks at it as a way to entrap him and to keep him servant to him. And that's how this chapter and verse ends here, that he sees David never being able to go back home, never being able to go back to Israel and ever be accepted again, that he has just been made to be abhorred in the eyes of the Israelites, and that he will now be linked in and tied to the Philistines. And of course, he wanted David to be in alliance with him because he's a mighty warrior and this would offer him protection. So again, very interesting the thoughts here of preservation and King Achish and really what David was doing and the lie and the ruse that he portrayed here is to protect himself. Just all fascinating thoughts, very difficult to explain, very difficult to come in context with when we think of as God looks at David as a man after his own heart. Just trying to mix all this together and make sense of it. So I'll give you that for a little bit of food for thought. We'll pick up next week and see where this story goes and even some greater twists. And maybe we can see God's hand um, picking David as he maybe went a little astray here, but then eventually bringing him back into what God's will truly was for David's life. So thanks again for listening. God bless you. Hope you are encouraged and inspired and blessed by this study today. Bye bye.